So I've been wondering about Jordan Peterson. Magazine recently called him the most influential intellectual or public intellectual of our day or something like that. He's been all over the place on cable news. He's everywhere. He's published a book that's #1 bestseller. So if you don't know who he is, Google him before you watch this video. If you know who he is, which is more likely, then you'll know that he's a controversial figure. He polarizes people. He is viewed very differently by people who oppose him versus those who support him. I think that's true of anybody who's polarizing, but in his case, I feel like the chasm between the two camps is so wide that it warrants special attention. And for that special attention, I brought my friend Ben over. Ben, you've got some real street credentials. You actually did study philosophy academically, right?
That's true. I don't know how that. Yeah, I hope that gives me some credential, but
I think it'll balance me out because I know nothing. So I don't have a college degree or anything like that. So you lend me an air of credibility. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And so when I first talked to you about this, had you already started looking into Jordan Peterson, or was it kind of like at the start of your exploration of the man?
Yeah, when we first talked about it, I think I'd probably watched a few videos and maybe watched a couple of those Jordan Peterson demolishes SJW videos, because YouTube kind of takes you down that path. After you watch one or two videos on something, it kind of takes you to the extreme. So I'd maybe seen a couple, but since you mentioned that we might be doing this, I've kind of only been listening to Jordan Peterson and watching Jordan Peterson videos and stuff. With my spare intellectual watching and listening time, so I've kind of gone into the deep end since then. Just to give him a fair shake and see if I can put my finger on where he's coming from and who he is as best as I can tell.
So have you read either of his books? Maps of Meaning is the first one, I think.
Yeah, well, okay. Like you, I love books and I kind of collect them and have way too many books.
Yeah.
I feel like I have more books than I will read in my lifetime,
right.
And yet I'll keep buying more, and so I try to get books from the library.
That's
unless I know for sure that it's like a reference book or like my mushroom foraging books or other foraging books or like gardening books or things like that I'm going to refer back to again and again over years. So I reserved it at the library, but I'm 118th in line. So so it's going to be a while. So if we talk again in 6 months when I finally get the book, then we can talk about 12 Rules for Life. So I haven't had the chance to read other books, and I know that probably sounds like, well, what do we have to say? But he has a lot of video. There's a lot of other content.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure in some ways, the videos and that sort of is where he's at now. I don't want to know where he was at when he wrote Maps of Meaning, because that was 10 years ago or something like that.
It's 99.
Oh, he's
almost 20.
Yeah, and since then, I'm positively sure that his opinions, his beliefs, his philosophy, everything has evolved. I mean, it's not like he wrote this book and then was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. This is it. No, he's continued to do his work and research and develop his philosophy and all that stuff. So I'm sure that what you get now is more accurate, right, of the man he is currently versus who he was 20 years ago.
Yeah. No, it seems like, just the kind of thinker that he is, that he's changed in the last year, the last 6 months. And though, having listened and to some of his lectures and his podcast, it seems like some of that stuff goes deep. I think that book really had a huge impact on who he is because of the text that he had to study for that.
Right.
I feel like that's kind of where he constructed a lot of his way of viewing the world. So maybe in some ways, and he has some lectures on his podcast as well, it's called Maps of Meaning. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you know, so on. I think to a dozen or something like that. And yeah, so I think that content is kind of in line with the book,
right?
Though, just in summation,
right. Yeah, well, from the sounds of it, that book is like his attempt at sort of drafting not a philosophy, but a theory of everything. From what I've read about the book, it's like his attempt to sort of tie everything together, like philosophically, spiritually,
like of culture,
psychologically,
and morality,
everything. Yeah. So I think, you know, whether it's all good, all bad, or a mix of both, which is probably the most likely outcome, that, you know, in some ways he probably is very on the money, in other ways he probably slips a bit up, but regardless, the ambition required to undertake something like that is, to me, admirable. So if nothing else, the guy has vision, balls, like, you know,
He's
to
got
embark
balls, so
on,
that's
like,
true.
to devise a theory of everything. I mean, you must have some confidence, or you must be possessed by this idea, or this, you know, this duty to do it, or whatever. But like, man, and, you know, to me, it's like, where do you start? A theory of everything. Wow. But anyways, so basically what we're going to do now is we're going to watch, I don't know, as many videos as we can in a reasonable amount of time. So hour and a half. We'll just come back at the end and do kind of like a wrap-up video and see where we are. Like an hour and a half later, after immersing ourselves in the mind of Jordan. All right, stay tuned.
So one thing I respect and appreciate is, he said, facing the thing that you least want to face. And I don't know where it kind of originates in philosophy. It seems like the existentialists really ran with it. But like Descartes, one time he said that if you want to be a real seeker after truth, you have to at some point in your life question or doubt everything. Mm-hmm. And or something like that.
Yeah.
Paraphrase. What are you? It's close.
Yeah.
And you know, either way, like I think that's a really important idea, and it's frightening. You know, because when you start getting to some of your deep presuppositions, or you know, some of the things that you question at your foundation, you have to then build it back up, because you have to live your life still.
Or you become a nihilist.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what happens to, you know, people who are nihilists, is like they've lost that structure, but they haven't built anything up, so they're just kind of like, oh, life sucks. There's no meaning, there's no purpose. It's like, because you haven't constructed meaning yet. Mm-hmm. You tore down the old meaning, which was not your own, and now you haven't built up your own yet, so you're kind of in this in-between purgatory type zone, right? Campbell says the exact same thing. He says the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And, you know, it's a pattern that's in mythology, and obviously Peterson is like pretty well versed in that area. It seems like my favorite part of that whole sort of clip was the last part that we watched, where he was talking about the shadow. Mm-hmm. And facing your monster and stuff, and that's where he was talking about that, you know, the cave you fear to enter. I think that's a really, really valuable and worthwhile insight, much like what you were saying about questioning everything. I think that's the journey into that cave. That's where you question everything, and eventually you get to that treasure at the end, and realize there is no end. But regardless, I can see where he's going with that, and I think it ties in really well with psychology and sort of those insights. But so yeah, the postmodernist thing is really just a relativistic view of, like, you cannot know absolute truth. All you know is your own. There's no way you can know what anyone else is thinking. Is it almost like solipsism? Yeah, in a way, because it sort of feels like it's connected, because, you know, you really can't verify that there is another person there. It's really just in your head.
Yeah, you can't get outside of your own consciousness.
Right.
However, that, I don't know, that if that's what the solipsistic position can be reduced to, then, you know, I think of Occam's razor and the principle of parsimony, you know, that if you look at what you're made of, or if you could, I mean, like, you obviously don't look at your own, but, you know, if you look at research that has been done into the brain and into the composition of your body, and then what the universe is made of, and what the chemistry that goes on in your body, then the simplest explanation is that because we're made of the same stuff as each other, and our brains are similarly composed, that then therefore our experiences are going to be somewhat similar,
right,
or probably largely similar. Not that because I have an experience and I can't kind of escape that therefore like I can't assume that you have a conscious experience. So
right.
like the solipsistic viewpoint isn't compelling to me in that regard.
No, and I don't mean as
pre-scientific almost.
But it's connected to the idea of that you can't ever really ascertain anything with certainty beyond your own experience.
I wasn't saying that you were like
all
for it.
No, yeah.
I mean,
so it's interesting to me because like to me that is all true. Like I can't verify anything beyond my own experience. So really, I don't know that you're not just part of some delusion that I'm having and all that stuff. I mean, but. So that to me only tells me
that delusion.
Exactly.
If that delusion's happening, then it's happening to me. No, not you. I know.
I'm the figment.
I know whose universe you think you're in.
I'm the figment. Sorry.
Yeah.
But even okay. So to me, that is true. Number one. Number two. That only tells me that I have to base my stuff on my best guess. And so, like, I can be 99% certain of things, like what you said about the fact that you're having a very similar experience to me in your own mind, with probably a similar, inner voice, and I can be pretty damn certain of that. I just can't be 100% certain.
No,
like so that
absolute certainty,
right? Yeah, and so that all it tells me is that I can't be absolutely certain of anything, but I can live my life based on the best evidence But again, the best evidence according to my own standards of what the best evidence is, right? Because some people, the best evidence is the Bible. And you can show them piles of scientific research, peer-reviewed, and double-blind, and whatever you want. They're going to look at that. They don't care because that's not the kind of evidence that they value. So ultimately, it does fall back to this sort of idea of, that's true to them, and you and I can say, well, no, science is more reliable, and that definitely disproves this young Earth idea and stuff like that. But to them, it's as true as the scientific method is true to us and what it reveals to us. So you kind of can't get out of this problem of, from their point of view, and they can just dig their heels in and just be like, nope, it's a lie.
Yeah.
Science is a lie, right? Yeah. So how do you get out of that? Can you get out of that? And because one of the things that struck me about Jordan Peterson, I'll bring it back to the topic, is that he speaks with certainty.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So much certainty, and sometimes it feels really nice and it's inspiring, like when he talks about responsibility and taking responsibility for yourself. But other times where he deviates into areas where he may not be as well versed, I feel like that certainty and that authority that he speaks with is definitely what is getting him in trouble, and rightfully so, because again, we didn't get very deep, but there are definitely things that he said that were contradictory, things that he said that are he's cherry picking, or he's looking at again, he's a polymath in the sense that philosophy, psychology, all these different things, but he doesn't seem to get very deep. He just cherry picks. So he likes Nietzsche and he likes the Bible, but he doesn't has he looked into Vedanta? Has he looked into all these different things? He seems to have a superficial knowledge of a lot of things, but it doesn't seem to go deep in certain areas, and that's where I think his authoritative tone and the way that he speaks with certainty is dangerous. But yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I've kind of always found it a bit off-putting when somebody speaks, with certainty. It just seems more precise to kind of couch your statements with, some qualification. But maybe that's just maybe part of that could be intellectual cowardice. Or social cowardice, not necessarily intellectual, but I'm not convinced of that. But I agree. Sometimes I think it's because he's got his understanding, and he can, and this goes back to Nietzsche, and I find it also seems to be kind of a almost a pseudoscientific view of things, and it's kind of weird talking about him, you know, because I feel like he'd have a lot of interesting things to say in response, you know. If
maybe one day we'll make it happen. I would hope so.
If we're bringing up any good points, you know, then
yeah, of course.
Then I think he would have very interesting things to say back, and so talking in his absence is interesting. But
maybe one day we'll get to have that conversation. I hope so.
That would be.
Seems
cool.
like an interesting guy. So
yeah, I feel like he's pretty high up there at this point. But
I'd rather do it with Joe Rogan. He's my dream. He's my dream. It's like the only celebrity I ever want to meet. So I can just hang out and smoke a J with him. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Sidetrack. Yeah. So I think. Yeah. I mean, I want to see more. I want to see more because when he's on and when he's hitting my notes, I like it.
Yeah.
It's just finding the right Jordan Peterson for me, and I feel like there's a lot of different aspects of him, and I think I need to find the aspect of him that.
Yeah, well, you know, something that actually it's kind of surprising for me is like his biblical lectures, because he analyzes the Bible with a psychoanalytic lens, and it seems like he considers himself like a cultural Christian, and again, I'm not trying to like force him into a position or anything, but I don't feel like I've seen him
he's
like
admitted that as much,
interpret or present himself as literally believing much of the Bible at all. But when you listen to his biblical lectures, they're actually really interesting, which I was shocked, to be honest. Like I was kind of surprised that I could be interested in a biblical lecture, because you know I've read it, and I was raised like with a very literalist interpretation, like a fundamentalist interpretation and view of the Bible, and so I felt like I knew it, but the way that he talks about it, you know, he talks about it like he did with other myths that we saw him talk about.
Symbolically, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what...
and his archetypes and his, and like how you can extract like some psychological value for your own life.
Right.
And, you know, it's interesting whether or not it's like 100% accurate or justified. You know, I kind of have to go back to the original text and see, like, is he taking more out of it than
I don't
justified?
think so. I think the thing with myth, especially when you regard it from a symbolic point of view and try to glean lessons out of it, is that it can become like an ink blot that you just kind of project a lot of stuff from your own subconscious onto it and find meaning where you would just find meaning because that's your sort of predisposition, right? So
is that in the text or in you, though? So
it's both, obviously. And I think flat out, right off the bat, whatever you think of the Bible, it was written by human beings. It's a product of human minds and hearts. And so, if anything, it has a lot to tell us about human nature. So the fact that he's regarding it as a sort of from a psychoanalytic aspect that's the right way to approach it, in my opinion. Or Joseph Campbell. I don't know if you've ever...
I haven't read Joseph Campbell.
See, so if you like that lecture on the Bible, you probably really like Joseph Campbell, because this is the ground that he walked on in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Like and he, again, from what I understand and from what I've seen, so put it to you this way: Joseph Campbell, this is all he ever studied. He wasn't a psychologist. He wasn't he didn't get into philosophy. He was a comparative mythologist, and so all he did was compare world religions, mythological stories, fables, and he developed like those archetypes that you keep talking about. Jung touched on that, but really the archetypes were brought out by Campbell. He came up with the monomyth. There was only one myth, one pattern, the hero's journey, which I think Peterson talks about, and this pattern basically can be found in all of the myths of the world and also in all of the like Star Wars. Joseph Campbell is the reason the original Star Wars trilogy got made. Like George Lucas consulted with him to apply this pattern of the hero's journey to his script, which was like he couldn't figure out how to get the script right. So Campbell, you probably really enjoy. And
it's too bad he didn't consult with him on 4, 5, and 6.
Oh no.
Or the prequel. Sorry,
Yes,
the prequel.
yeah, I
1, 2,
know.
and 3. Yeah.
But it's a pattern that once you if you read, I have 2 copies of it, so I can lend it out. The Hero with 1,000 Faces. I think Campbell wrote it in the 50s, and he will take you through all of that in one book, and it's like a life-altering book. Like I would love to hear your thoughts on it when you're done.
That'd be great.
And again, Campbell, he's so well read, in that one aspect, so you can trust his authority because that's all he talks about is this one side of it. He doesn't get into politics, and he doesn't get into economics, and he doesn't. His whole thing is drawing wisdom from these ancient tales. And my introduction to the Bible was Campbell, and it was so from the get-go, to me, the Bible has been fascinating because I look at it as there are these hidden symbols, and the Garden of Eden story, which you can dismiss as just of course that's not how it happened. That story tells you more about human nature than a lot of entire introductory psychology textbooks, if you look at it the right way, right? And that's what Campbell was good at, is finding those angles. But it sounds like Peterson obviously does that too, because a lot of people have said that about his Bible lectures.
Yeah, and the first Bible lecture in his podcast I think it was 2 hours, and I'm not sure if he even finished a verse, maybe 1 or 2 verses in the first book.
Oh God.
Or the first chapter. Yeah. So, but he's laying the foundation of the rest of his lectures there.
Right.
And it's fascinating, and the way he approaches it is really refreshing, because he's very open, and he says he's trying to learn through the process as well. And so though he might talk with a lot of certainty, he really seems very open to learn and have his mind changed, and to figure things out. And that going back to what I was what we were talking about before about being willing to question your most sacred beliefs and the deepest most frightening things that you can question, and maybe he was talking in one of those videos about unleashing your inner monster or something like that. I don't know exactly how I put it, but something along those lines. Seems to me that's part of it, is opening that Pandora's box inside of you that is kind of lurking beliefs, all those ideas that that you're frightened of. But once you've done that, you're stronger. If you don't spiral into nihilism, if you don't spiral out of control, if you come back from that, and he seems like a pretty good person to accompany.
Oh yeah,
someone on that journey.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, I can see the appeal totally. Just watching that 40 minutes worth of clips, really. I mean, but it was good because they were longer, and you could get a sense of what he was talking about. Yeah, I mean, it seems very interesting guy, has lots of interesting things to talk about and say. But then again, it makes me question when he clings to ideas like IQ, which again, I'm ignorant, so maybe I haven't done the latest, but to my knowledge, and according to the latest that I know of, IQ tests have been discredited as valid. Basically intelligence, you can't pin it down to one number. And so at one point he says, intelligence is a cross-domain quality, or he says something about it being a cross-domain thing. It's something that applies to many different... My understanding of the IQ test is that they only test for one domain. And so you could be dominant, or you could have a lot of strength in a lot of other domains, but if those are not the domains tested by the IQ test, then you're going to come out looking like an idiot, even though you may have a lot of intelligence, just different, you know what I mean? There's emotional intelligence, there's, all these different things. He was even saying, you could be good at math, but not good at English. So if the IQ test has a bias towards one of those things, how can you look at it as a reliable measurement of... Yeah, well... And that seems that seems to me like a huge, it's almost unforgivable, for someone of that stature to cling to an idea like that, unless there's new studies or new research out that I haven't heard of, in which case I'm humbled. I apologize.
I think what he would say to that is that, that is another symptom of the postmodern cancer, that's infected our society. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, like you, I'm no psychologist. You know, I haven't read the literature, and so
No.
in a way, you know, like what I have to say about it is somewhat irrelevant. You know, but from what I've heard from him and from others, is that the idea that IQ is like that it's culturally biased. What I've heard is that that's not the case, and that it measures general intelligence, and that attribute that he talks about it like not all the time, but you know he does talk about it, and like we saw there, he talks about how that impacts people's success,
Right.
and their competence. You know, like how they're able to perform certain tasks, and you know what I've heard him and some others say is that if we don't acknowledge IQ, then it's like we're and again, you know, he loves bringing things back to Marxism and post-modernism, and that if we act like IQ isn't a thing, and that or as if like we're all sort of equal or the same in our mental faculties, then everybody's just earned where they're at, and nobody has had any advantage or disadvantage, and when you do that, you kind of disrespect the everybody. You disrespect everybody involved, especially the people on the bottom. And so that's one of the problems that he has with ignoring that from a moral perspective. But I mean, factually, he seems 100% certain that it measures our general intelligence, and that is an attribute that matters. Now, like I said, my opinion on that is like my personal opinion. It's not really, like, it's not research, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm just trying to do the best I can to recount what I've heard from experts.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, I don't know, you know, because like some time ago I had heard that, you know, it was culturally biased, and that in Teachers College we studied someone named Howard Gardner, who talks about multiple intelligences. I think he had 7 at the time. I don't know if there are more now, and it talks about your ability to be intelligent in one way, and then not so much in others. Like maybe you're extremely intelligent musically or linguistically or logically or visually, or through your tactile abilities, or and you know, Jordan did seem to touch on that. He said that it seems to diverge as your general IQ goes up, that you seem to have like a imbalance. But again, I've wanted to hear him comment on Howard Gardner, because he seemed like, we learned about him in Teachers College, so he has made some impact, undeniably. You know, that we studied him at Ottawa U and talked about him, and that was like it was kind of canonical.
Yeah.
At the time, that was like
well established.
7 or 8 years ago. You know,
Right.
like that was, we learned that, like it was, we had to incorporate that into our teaching pedagogy, like our practices, or we were doing something wrong.
Right.
So I'd be interested to hear what he has to say about that. I feel like he gets thousands of questions, so
Well, yeah, he said no. Well, and I think you don't even need to, like, again, so part of me thinks that you can deduce this stuff without having to go into research. You can just look at your own experiences. You can look at people you've met throughout your life. You can look at different jobs, different classes you've taken, and you can really, if you just analyze your own data, I think you'll find that there are multiple. To call it intelligence is almost like it's just aptitudes. Right? Some people are better at, like, they're more task orientated. There are people who thrive in certain environments and not in others. And basically to me, the IQ test is the cultural aptitude test designed by the culture that you're meant to be a member of. So of course it's going to, like the people who are at the top of that culture, it's going to favor them it's going to mirror their attributes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're at the top of a hierarchy and you're trying to get more people like you up there, you're going to, like, the tests are going to be biased towards people who have your aptitudes, your knowledge bases, your things like that. So for me, it's like, there's not even a cultural bias even if there is no cultural bias to me, it's a written test, right? Like, right there, you're limiting it to a very finite kind of intelligence. Like, you're not getting people to go out there and build fucking houses. You're not getting people out there to do, spatial awareness, all these different things. Like, you're testing them on math, English, history, memorizing facts. Those are very, very specific and limited forms of intelligence. And so, you can call it general intelligence, but then it's like, okay, define general intelligence for me. You get into this problem of who defines the term. Well, the test is designed by them as well. So you're measuring this made up statistic that's based on the parameters that are, again, it's all very subjective. It's like I could design a different IQ test for my society that would measure different aptitudes and you'd get different results, right? Based on what we're valuing. Like, what are we looking for in people, right? In our society, the types of skills that we're looking for and the types of aptitudes that we're looking for, that's what the test is meant to measure. So if you don't fit in this culture or in this sort of world that we're in, you might still be very intelligent, very bright, very talented in all these different ways, but if you don't fit in the very finite mold that they're giving you, then you're not going to come off on that aptitude test looking very good. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like it's like a trap. It's like you get trapped in it. It's like it measures something that was basically set by the people who made the test. Like, it was made by people to measure people. It's all subjective. Like, it's very hard to get grounding. But if you look at practical experience in the world, and the way that people's skills and cognitive aptitudes vary, then you'll see, like, yeah, obviously nobody is just stupid. Like, unless you have some kind of actual disorder or, I don't know, what would you call it? Retardation. I don't want to politically correct. That's one thing I agree with him on, is we're a little too sensitive to that. But,
Well, we like, there are witch hunts and, not quite literally, but, people lose their jobs and their careers, and sometimes lives are destroyed over things that they say, as if someone can't change their mind.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that's always bugged me with even just looking at texts, at authors, that if somebody writes something down or says it on video, it's like they're stuck with that forever.
Right. And
they can never defend that or say, like, I was wrong about that,
they do, but it doesn't often seem to
and even if they do,
right?
It doesn't change it, and I don't think that's the right attitude to have. No. I think we need to be able to talk about ideas, even some dangerous ones,
totally,
or even maybe all dangerous ideas, and I don't think, like, shutting people up and closing doors, and I don't feel like that's making the world a better place.
No.
And I feel like at the same time, as the door is being shut on political correctness to some extent, I do feel like some people then feel like it's okay to be just an asshole, and that's not. It's not the point.
No.
The point isn't just to be able to say whatever you want and pretend like that's not going to have any consequences. Just like that's not the point of free speech.
Right.
Of course, there can be consequences for saying volatile or inflammatory things, and it's not going to make the world any better to be an asshole about things.
There's this conflict, like, people don't understand with free speech. It's like, by law, you're allowed to say whatever you want. You can't get arrested for calling your neighbor the N-word or whatever. But if there's a video of that on social media, your boss can fire you. They're allowed to do that.
Yeah, that's not the same
if you're a business owner, the world can boycott you, and that's, you're not going to go to jail. That's what free speech is about, right? So it's almost like you can't have it both ways.
No,
you can be an asshole if you want, and I will stand up for your right to be a racist or white supremacist, but I won't be your friend. I'm not going to give your business money. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not going to hire you to mow my lawn or do anything.
It doesn't deal with the social consequences.
No, exactly.
It's about what the government is allowed to do to you.
Exactly.
And okay.
Yeah.
But I do feel like sometimes when people are calling themselves advocates of free speech, sometimes they seem to think that it it means that there aren't going to be social consequences for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's about the government. What the government's allowed to do.
Exactly.
And that's it. That's what it's about.
Yeah. And then there's a rule in place for hate speech. So if you're trying to rally people to go kill all the, whatever, LGBTQ or whatever, then they can arrest you, right? I mean, that's kind of where they draw the line.
Probably a good thing.
I agree. I'm for that. That's what I mean, right? So it's like, as long as that's taken care of, you say whatever the hell you want. I'm cool with that. Just don't expect me to be your friend or give you my hard-earned money. And, to circle back, like, I went off the rails there because for me, the IQ thing just doesn't feel right, but I think it is a measurement of a form of aptitude. And what you said about ignoring it entirely doesn't do us any, favors. I agree with that as well. I think that, it's a measurement of something, and it's something that correlates with, obviously, earning in this culture or in this civilization. So it's a valid measurement, and it's just to say, does anybody actually believe that everyone is equal? In terms of like everybody is born the exact same in terms of aptitudes and potential, and everything is cultural. I feel like that would be a really hard position to hold.
I don't know. I feel like when I studied sociology in university, that was the idea that you start as a blank slate, and you're conditioned, and I feel like that your conditioning was mainly in what you were taught and how you're raised, and I don't know. I feel like that was kind of what we were taught.
Really,
that it's predominantly, if not all, how you're raised, and it seems ludicrous.
100%.
So maybe I'm misrepresenting it, and I mean, it's been a long time, and I only took one sociology class, but
I have a hard time seeing how anyone can hold that position. That it's all culture, all nurture, no nature.
I think it's because maybe they're looking at something like a couple of examples, and then just running with them. If you look at feral children are one of the things that they cling to, and so sometimes children, they end up if they're abandoned, some of them have ended up living with a pack of wolves or wild dogs, and they're raised by the dogs, and they move like a dog and have body language like a dog or a wolf, and so that is a really remarkable thing. And I think if you see that malleability out of that horrendous situation, then and you look at some other examples similar to that, then I think it can, and you see lows, and you kind of build up this.
It's like an echo chamber, right? Yeah, if you just look at one type of evidence, but I mean that betrays the fact that a lot of it is nature. I mean, again, because what defines humans in so many ways is our adaptability. So again, that's nature right there. The fact that a human being can be raised by dogs and start moving like a dog speaks to our nature, not just our, you know what I mean? To say that it's only culture that shapes us is crazy. The culture is a product of our adaptability and the way that we can communicate in so many different modes, right? Symbolically, non-verbally, all these different ways. So to write off nature and to say it's all nurture is again.
Oh, it seems completely out of touch with reality.
Yeah. So
and
to say that everyone's equal as well. It's some people are. You can see some people are born with handicaps. They were not born the same as everyone. But I think what people are getting at is everybody is of equal worth, no matter whether you were born with a handicap or not, whether you were born gay, black, whatever, anything. You're worth the same. Your inherent value, you should be treated well. You should have a certain modicum of respect. Yeah. You should have all the same rights as everyone else. I think that part is the equality part that I understand. But to say that everyone should have the same outcomes is obviously doesn't make any sense.
Sound like Jordan Peterson? Have you heard him say that? Or? No, he says the quality of outcome is reprehensible. I think it's a direct quote.
Yeah, I have to agree with him on that one. I mean, that obviously you can't have the same outcomes for everyone. That doesn't make sense. But you can make sure that the people who have the worst outcomes their outcome is still decent, and they have food and shelter. You know what I mean? Like that's all that I think, at least from my mind, that's what these so-called progressives or social justice warriors or whatever, at the heart of what they want, that's kind of what they're looking at. Is like, listen, we don't want the poorest people to be as rich as the richest people. We just want them to at least have shelter, food, drinking water that's clean. Like, to me, that's not equality of outcomes by any means. That's not what they're after. Is that what people are after? They want everybody to have the same?
I think it depends.
I feel like he's putting up straw man. He's like, oh, look, they want equality of outcomes. No one wants that. Who the fuck wants that?
Well, I think, like, if you look at people who want, like, wealth redistribution, there will be a spectrum of that, and I'm sure there are some people who would like it if money was not only more equitably distributed, but maybe like amongst everybody. And like I can understand somebody being infuriated by the idea that the majority of wealth is owned by 1%, and then even the majority of that is owned by like 0.1% or something like that. And that is there's something about that doesn't feel fair.
Well, there's like a crucial flaw in the system, and it's going to lead to the system's collapse. If you had an ecosystem in the world where you had that kind of like distribution, where the 1% of predators consume 99%, or 85% of the resources, that ecosystem would collapse immediately, and that's what you're seeing on Earth right now. So it's, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and what I feel is that, depending on how quickly sort of AI like picks up and starts taking over jobs, that to me is where this whole situation seems extremely problematic. We're when we talk about say universal income or something like that, we're talking about it within our current context. And we don't know what things are going to be like in 15 years or 20 years or 30 years, or how it's going to pan out with AI, or if it will.
It's already here.
Yeah, but so as it takes over jobs, will we have? And this is something Sam Harris seems concerned with. Are we going to then have this class of trillionaires, and then the rest of the people are left with a much smaller pool of wealth even than they have now. Now, that goes back to relative and absolute poverty in my mind as well. Is that it seems kind of hard to be satisfied with what you have, given just differences in wealth and wealth inequality. If you have less than somebody else, even if you have enough, and even if you're living a life that 100 years ago would have been, or 500 years ago, or whatever, take it back however far you want, would have seemed like lordly,
right?
And in a way, perhaps that's an insignificant point, because you have to be like somewhat happy and somewhat content, whether or not those are the ultimate goals. We're not going to dive deep into a value theory right now. I don't think we're going. I think it's a bit late. We're not going into that, but just assuming, axiomatically, that those are things that matter to some extent, that you need to have some enjoyment out of your life.
I think in some ways they matter more than just like some people kill themselves because they don't have enjoyment out of life. Like, so you're a survival machine. Your number one protocol is to survive and propagate, but then happiness supersedes that. Where people are depressed to the point where they have no joy in their lives, they'll actually overcome that very basic instinct to survive.
To live.
Right? So in a way, survival is not number one. We're willing to give that up if we're not happy. So I think, without diving into a value theory, I think you're on sound ground there to say that, yeah, it's pretty fucking important. But anyway, sorry. So if we agree on that, then
I'm not sure where I was going.
Oh shit, sorry, dude. I should break you off.
It's all good.
I just got now.
Yeah, I should have kept better track of my thought. The thing is, I started listening to you. And,
Sorry.
I need to be more self-centered and just like focus on what I'm going to say.
I'm bad for that. Sometimes just shit pops into my head and I'm like, I have to pursue this. I have to
fine.
see what he thinks.
It's a conversation. I wanted to go back to IQ, which probably isn't the wisest thing.
No, let's do it.
But
that's a problem area for
so
me.
one thing that Jordan Peterson talked about in one of the hundreds of hours of stuff that I've seen his at this point is that the military they seem to try to find like how to fit anybody in there, and because it's in their best interest to be able to recruit people, and it seems like if somebody doesn't have a lot of opportunities, it seems like that for them, for good or bad, there's an opportunity for them there.
Right.
But what he was saying is that they found it essentially impossible to find a position for someone with an IQ of 83 or less.
Sure.
And I hope I'm not misrepresenting that research, or which I haven't read. I'm just listening. I am representing Jordan Peterson, representing some research.
Yeah, I'll put some disclaimers on it. Like everything that we say is coming from the mouths of babes.
But
when I think that, and again, I don't deny that it's
But then does that mean that there's something there? Because that's everybody.
Sure.
Below 83.
And again, because IQ does measure something, again, I just don't think it measures your total intelligence or your total, the sum total of all your aptitudes, but it definitely measures something. And whatever it measures, when you get below that number, obviously there are detrimental effects, like to other parts. Maybe maybe IQ is the result of something else and not this sort of quality. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's the result of a bunch of different other things. And if you're missing a few of those things, you're going to score low there. But it doesn't mean that you're not strong here. But then at the same time, if you're only strong here, you can't find a place for you in the fucking military. I don't know, right? Like maybe you're an artist. Well, maybe that's where your aptitude is. And you score low everywhere else. Well, obviously the military is not going to ever find a place for those people. They might still be very creative, very enlightened people, very wise, whatever, intelligent in different ways. But so to me, it just tells me that I know there's something there. They're not just measuring fuck all. To me, it makes me think of Alan Watts. He says the greater the scientific mind, the greater it begins to grasp the relativity of all classification. Scientists is always making up categories for this, categories for that. As they're, this is a matter, this is a particle, they just keep going and they keep realizing that there's no end and it's all just this relativity of classification. And ultimately those classifications are just inventions of the human mind. And when we start to forget that, we give them importance, like we think IQ is actually a thing and it measures this thing called intelligence. Well, those are just two classifications that we have invented. Humans have invented these. And we understand them to mean something, but really, what the fuck do we know? It's just a bunch of, like a Russian doll, right? Every time you come up with another category, a smaller category, now we found a smaller particle. Ultimately, you're just measuring a continuous process.
I think that's a point to, like the language of it. Mm-hmm. But, I remember in my, and I took one psychology class, so I know, I'm highly qualified to be commentating on psychology, but one of the definitions that we were given of intelligence is that it's what intelligence test.
That's exactly what I was trying to say.
But I think that, that's a point about the language and about the truth of the language, but that doesn't change whether or not what they test, if that has that contributes to the outcome of people's lives,
right?
And either way, I think.
Like I said, I think it measures something else.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, it measures something that we have defined ourselves, and we've developed a test to measure it. And we've created the metric, and they're all inventions. And I understand, they do describe a reality, a phenomenon in reality, or a tendency, or a trend, if you will, a pattern,
Yep.
right? Like when we run this test on this thing and it comes up with this result, this is the pattern that we expect to see, and most of the time it's accurate. It doesn't give you the whole pattern, it just gives you this very small piece of it, in my opinion. And that's why I think relying on IQ tests, and again, to say that people who score high on the IQ test, which is one of the points that he was making, they're all in the top, echelon of society. Again, it's a society that was built by these people who, they're the ones who measure they're the ones who made the test. It's their society. Of course, it's going to reflect, the test is going to reflect the people at the top, because they're a product of the society that designed the test, that looks for those aptitudes, that takes people to the top. It's like a closed circuit, right?
I do feel like a problem with the way that he talks off, like with so much certainty, it seems often, is that it's always seemed to me that with the social sciences, you are emphasizing trends and emphasizing, sort of getting a better sense of what is often the case.
Right.
And I don't feel necessarily like that's contentious, but so to say that, IQ is going to, it seems kind of like it's used to say like this is the path, but I don't know. He said that he's worked with people with, I think he was talking one time about working with someone with a 90 IQ, and he was talking about how difficult it was to find a job that was not just completely frustrating for that person. Is there anything else that stuck out for you?
I like the rights and responsibilities thing, because it's true. I think what he says about that, and that's another part of the message that seemed to, I thought was valid. The idea that you should be talking about responsibility. I don't think instead of rights or instead of the oppression, but in addition to, because I think having rights means you have responsibilities. They go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think some rights, I think are like they're integral to a civilized society, and so at the core, it's a good idea. That seems, like whether it's you have the right not to be punched in the face, I think like that. Yeah. That seems pretty legitimate.
Yeah, I think so.
And I don't know. Do people feel like they have the right not to be offended?
See, yeah, that's where
like things like that. And I'm not saying he was saying that, but is that? Yeah. I feel like that's maybe the realm that he's thinking about it in, is that because I feel like when you're offended by something, like personally, this is how I feel about it. I'm not offended by something, then that to me it means it's a place for more inquiry.
On your part.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and so why am I offended? And do I have a blind spot there that I can dive deeper with and improve myself? But sometimes you're offended by something and you go to bed pissed off, and maybe it keeps you up, and but at the same time, I don't feel like that. For the most part, I mean, I'm willing to consider any specific example, for sure. But most part, it seems like offense shouldn't be like the end of a conversation, or the firing of somebody. No, that doesn't seem like the right kind of world that we should be creating.
Yeah, I think it depends on the level of offense, I guess, right? And what we consider appropriate and inappropriate for a workplace. What we consider appropriate with the relationships that we maintain and everything.
No, I'm sure there's a boundary for sure. Yeah. Going back to what we were talking about with free speech, that doesn't then open the door to just being an asshole to everybody.
No, absolutely.
And
although I support your right to do so. I mean, like I always say, I support the racist rights to speak what are their minds about it. I support it. Like you said, shutting it down is what is getting us into this position. Trying to censor it again, Peterson loves Jung. Jung said, what is repressed, or what is resisted persists and grows stronger. And that's exactly what happens when you try to stuff a segment of the population or an opinion down and not actually engage with it directly. It just grows stronger and stronger until it bursts forth and elects Donald Trump to be the president or whatever, right?
You have
different
to find
things
some
like
way
that,
of
right?
trying to
Brexit.
explain how that happened.
Yeah, and again, I'm looking at Brexit and Donald Trump from what I think are objective points of view, because I don't consider myself a liberal or conservative. I just look at, again, I'm on the side of the people personally. What's the best for the people, right? And what's integrity, and which is something that you don't find in politics. It's all corruption, it's all lies, right? So for me, I'm not on any side. I just think if you look at things objectively, like Brexit, like everyone that has an opinion on it that is an expert, it's like it's gonna trash the economy. It's so bad for us. Everybody who works in London is from the EU, so if you kick them all out, who's going to run all the shops and like the people who live there? It seems like unanimous, but then you've got people who don't look at that type of evidence. They go with a different type of evidence, with what their hearts or their gut tell them, or their prejudices or their biases. And so it's like, how do you bridge that gap in dialogue? Not by censoring them, certainly, but is there a way, Ben? Before we go to bed?
Well, do you think that there should be government intervention?
Like with regards to monogamy, perhaps? Like enforced monogamy?
I'm
just messing with you.
Yeah.
There was an uproar, right? Didn't Peterson say something about that? And people thought he meant like the government should mandate, give incels wives, but he was just talking about like socially
enforced monogamy.
Yeah, socially enforced, not mandated by the government.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, I haven't seen that clip. I heard him briefly at one point addressing it, but I haven't seen the original clip.
Should the government get involved?
Should they censor people at all? And then, like with hate speech laws, for example, do you think that's an entirely bad idea? And we don't have to go too deep. We're not getting paid for any of this, so.
Oh, I love going deep.
Okay.
Whether I'm going deeper. Anyways, yeah, I don't know. Well, I'd have to see how they define hate speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's like if you're inciting violence against people, if you're threatening it like in a public airway or something, like on Facebook, you're talking about how you're going to go out and kill all the
So
all
if it becomes criminal,
essentially, then it has to be enforced for sure. But I think if you want to say that all of these people are dumb or all these people are this or like you want to make these racist statements or white people are the superior race, you want to say that publicly, say it all you want. I'm cool with that. And again, I will. If the government tries to censor you, I will march for you. I'll do whatever. I'll vote so that you can keep doing it because I want to know who you are. So I want you to say it publicly, so I don't have to hang out with you and I don't have to go in your area. Cool. At least I know you, and at least I know where you're coming from. But I think ultimately, furthermore, the more you know about these views, the more you can engage with them and see that there are elements of them that are not unlike your own. Because I think all of these views come from a place of, like when you talk about white supremacists or, incels, whatever. I think for the most part, except for the sociopaths, it comes from a place of trauma and a place of hurt. Like these people are hurting. Like the incels and stuff, like to get to that point where you're willing to, drive a van and run over a bunch of people, like whether they should be hurting or not is irrelevant. They are experiencing that pain, and it's like, got to find a better way to engage with them and pull them back away from that shit, right? So you can't do that by censoring them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're mostly on the same page. I feel like, and maybe this is too much faith in conversation and dialogue, but I feel like when you talk about something, it's kind of the difference between like hiding a monster under the bed or shining a light on it. Mm-hmm. And that, I feel like when you shine a light on it, then you can, see that there's nothing there, or at the very least, like, there is never going to be something there with a literal monster.
Right. Yes, but you'll see the white supremacists for who they really are, as people, not a monster under the bed.
And maybe then you can start to address it.
Yeah.
And not just in an ostracizing kind of way. Like, there was a guy on, I think, Sam Harris's podcast who used to be a white supremacist. And you don't usually, that's not usually a perspective that, no, I've never heard that perspective ever.
Yeah.
I didn't, I didn't think that was a thing in my ignorance. But one of the things he talked about is like building bridges to people who are in that community, and he talked about the weird, like, fucked up way of recruiting that they've kind of got, how they kind of slowly lead people down that path, and manipulate them and sort of bring them into their group, people who are disenfranchised. And
it's always vulnerable people, or people who have experienced hurt, right?
Yeah, and so it seems like part of that problem is, not shining the light on these terrible ideas, these bankrupt ideas that, ultimately create some discord and chaos in our society. Yeah, that have no place in a civilized, good world.
No, I agree, man. Yeah, well, we agree on that for sure. Dialogue is going to be, and again, not ostracizing dialogue, because that's not really dialogue, right? That's more just shouting at each other when you're approaching something. Like, the best example I can come up with is like these message boards where atheists debate religious people. I used to, early on, 5 years ago, I used to be into those. Like, I used to go into them all the time, and what always staggered me was that people weren't going in there to actually see what the truth is. They're just going there to fight and say my truth is the truth. Your truth is not the truth. It's stupid. And you could tell from the way, especially from both sides, but especially to me the atheist side, they would come in and it would be like, loaded questions, basically like questions that are actually just insults, and you're expecting to have an honest debate with people when you just basically called them morons for believing what they believe in their hearts. So there was no attempt at dialogue there. That was just arguing and fighting, and there was no progress. And I used to always say to these people, do you actually want to, save the religious people from this ignorance and their false beliefs? Yeah. Well, you're doing it the absolute worst fucking way, you idiot. You're part of the problem. You're making them go further the other way. And they have things in common too. It's really just look at the commonalities, and you'll realize that you believe in something too, dummy, and what he believes in is not what you think it is. You know what I mean? Really. You just get past that surface level of disagreement. But my friend said the other day, she's like, we're just chatting, and she's like, yeah, world's fucked right now. I was like, it does that way, but it's always been fucked. I think everybody thinks that. It's just being alive as a human is fucked.
I feel like if have you heard of Steven Pinker?
Yeah,
okay, and I haven't read his books, but I've listened to a few podcasts with him. I think Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, and maybe something else. But and I've part of The Better Angels of Our Nature. It's a big book.
Yeah.
Which is no excuse, but there's so many books.
That's right. Limited time.
But anyway, he really emphasizes the good things that are going on in the world.
Yeah.
And when you think about some of the incredible things that we've accomplished, and in contrast to our past. And I mean, in a way, it's really easy, from where we're sitting. I get that, from where we're sitting, we're not having bombs dropped on us for oil or something like that, so we're privileged in that respect, out of, not out of our own merits, just because of
luck of circumstance. Yeah, totally.
For our own dumb luck. But at the same time, it seems like there are a lot of incredible and amazing and beautiful and good things going on in the world. And that's something that struck me the other day on Canada Day, because I feel like there is some tension, legitimate tension, between our history and celebrating Canada.
Sure.
And I get that, and that's I think it's important to recognize the problems that have occurred, and the injustices, especially to Indigenous people in Canada. That seems like maybe the largest like group that has been maligned here. Though I mean, I don't want to like line that up as a competition or
no, of course
a lot
not.
of people.
I think that's a fair statement.
A lot of terrible things happen,
Yeah.
but so I understand, like being upset. That seemed to really like kind of bubble through last year on 150. Like a lot of people, and I get that, but I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, like this is a shit country and we shouldn't celebrate it. I think we should. Like there's I was thinking today about some of the amazing things that we have here. That our country has been going for that amount of time, and that we have a country at all. That it's not like British Columbia versus Alberta, or like warring, like literally fighting for our lives, or even like other, if you go like other tribes, like fighting for territory, or something like just this crazy animal, crazy shit that has gone on in our ancient past. Like,
we got it good.
And there are a lot of great things.
Totally.
And like some of it is like there's good and bad in things. Like you can go to the grocery store and get food all year, and that's fantastic. But it's also, it can be shit where that came from.
Right.
Whether it came from across the world, or maybe the people who were working for that food, they don't have a great life, or something like that, or maybe the land wasn't treated well. So like anyway, I think it's important at the end of the day to try to settle on the good that we have going on.
Definitely.
And not to ignore the bad, but like I think that kind of helps move us forward. When we're focused on that good, and when we remember that and acknowledge that, because there's so much of it, really. Yeah,
totally.
And I think too, you have to like. I've studied marketing a lot because I used to run a marketing business. That tells you how well I went. I mean, I used to.
You were very good at it.
Yeah,
too good.
My wife's art just got too good.
Yes.
But so one of the things you learn is that people respond more readily to negative things.
Yeah, that's scientifically proven
and
as well.
so
Negativity bias.
Yeah, and so they're more inclined to. And when you see news, you're more likely to pay attention if it's something 100%. Dangerous or bad.
That's why you think the world's in the worst state it's ever been in.
Yeah. And then when you're aware of that, you can understand, like, okay, so that's a part of our psychology, but it's not the truth.
Well, that's why gratitude, like having any kind of gratitude practice or mindfulness of the things that you have is so powerful, because it kind of leverages or counterbalances that inherent pessimism that we have evolved. I love the story because it's like, it's an evolutionary mechanism, right? Negativity bias is a survival advantage because you notice the threats. And the threats are the things that are going to kill you 150,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, 90,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. Now, though, that negativity bias that was a survival advantage for 200,000 years is turning us into these like cynical, pessimistic, like the world's shit. Meanwhile, we're eating like kings every night. We have refrigeration, medicine, like, you know what I mean? So the gratitude thing is a huge antidote, I think, for that. Like waking up every morning and just saying thank you. Like whatever you have, just look at it and be like, fuck yeah. That's Meister Eckhart. He said, if your only prayer was thank you, it would be enough. Just fucking, that's all you need, baby.
No, that's wise.
You. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, like you said, it's too easy to look at the bad shit. It feels natural. You just kind of like lean that way. Anywho, well, it was great chatting with you. Yeah, it's getting late.
Yeah, I had a good time. Yeah, gotta get to bed.
Yeah, we'll do it again. We don't have to just do Jordan Peterson. I mean, we can talk about a wide range of topics, I'm sure.
Oh, I feel like, if it was early in their day, we could go for 5 hours. I don't know if anybody would want to listen, but
No.
like we could go.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
No, and like like maybe you pick a topic or something, and then I pick one, and we can just go back and forth. But it's nice to have people that you can have these types of conversations with.
Yeah, it's great. I had a good time. I learned some things, and not just about you, but about myself, about life.
Did you? Nice. Oh wow, that's good.
Yeah, I had a good time.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Thank you. I'm glad that you had such a good time. I learned lots as well, and I got lots of items that I need to start researching now. Post-modernism is at the top of my list. Thanks for joining us. Live well, my friends.